Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. And I got really a great treat for us today. We are speaking to Peachy Keenan, who has a new book out, Domestic Extremist, a practical guide to winning the culture war. And you're going to see the meme up on the screen while she's talking, because Peachy Keenan is a pseudonym. And because Peachy Keenan is in Los Angeles, you can understand why she'd want to use a pseudonym for these things. Peachy, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ed. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so Domestic Extremist, a practical guide to winning the culture war. Now, it's a new book. Is that out yet, or is it just coming out?
It comes out next week on D-Day, Tuesday.
Tuesday, all right.
Yep.
D-Day it is, yeah, June 6th.
We're storming the beaches, storming the bookstores on Tuesday.
I was going to say, I mean, that's actually a pretty good metaphor, because especially if you're living in Los Angeles, I mean, you might have to attack the beaches in Los Angeles.
Yeah. You'll get attacked on the beaches, actually.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you come to write the book?
Well, I'm a writer. I've been a writer for, my whole adult life. I started writing about politics back in 2019 for The American Mind, which is a Claremont publication.
It is a fine one.
Yeah, and that's been a lot of fun. And I tweet under, the handle Keenan Peachy. And I started being an anonymous writer because at the time I was writing for a very large, extremely woke entertainment corporation. I won't name the name, in Los Angeles. And at these places, as you know, some women's opinions are more equal than others. And there was no way I could ever express anything I felt about, the 2016 election. Everyone else was with her, Hillary. And so I kind of had to channel, my own opinions about things somewhere. So I kind of I wrote something, I sent to a friend who was a founder of The American Mind, Matt Peterson. He published it, and that was sort of the birth of Peachy Keenan. But in my non-online life, I'm a mother. I have a bunch of kids, and I am basically a housewife. But I do work. I work at home, and I somehow found myself now having written this book and doing all these interviews under my pseudonym, this had been just a fun, wild adventure for me.
Well, I mean, and it's, my wife was very proud of being a homemaker. So yeah, absolutely. You've got like 5 full-time jobs, basically. If you're a homemaker, you're working for a living. Absolutely. But I'm not sure how you found time to write a book, but I mean, this is pretty significant, especially in this particular moment. You talk about going from being a secular pro-choice feminist to a devoted Catholic mom of 5. So maybe tell us a little bit about that journey. I think that journey sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason I wrote this book, because, I am, as I say, extremely domestic these days, but I didn't start out like this. Domestic extremists are made, not born, especially in my case. I had, raised by secular atheists. I was sort of raised in these sort of elite private school institutions. All my friends were liberals. I was a liberal too. I was a feminist, pro-choice. I thought that people who were conservatives or who believed in God, I thought they were all, hicks, they were rubes, flyover country. I prided myself on being a coastal elitist. I had no interest in marriage. Kids were something, you wanted to avoid pregnancy, that not actually get pregnant. I mean, I just bought all of it, like many people in my generation, and like a lot of young women now, sadly. And I just had this sort of slow awakening, like many people have as they get older. I went from being a liberal to a conservative, probably like around 9/11, to be honest. I kind of like woke up and was like, oh, wait a second. Why are people burning the American flag right now? I thought we were under attack. Like, what? I was so confused by all that, by the reaction from the left. And then when I met my husband, I was still socially liberal, and he kind of had his own, he had been a liberal who had become more conservative, pro-life. And just by dating him and kind of falling in love with him, he sort of wooed me over to his side. And then I had my first child, and I thought, wow, and I was in my 30s, and I was like, wow, this is great. Like, no one told me, like, I really love being a mom. I love this baby. Like, I want to have as many as I can. I don't have that much time left. I have to hustle. And so that was sort of, before I knew it, I had a whole bunch, I had 3 under 3, and then we kept going. And here I am now, I have children about to graduate high school. And I like to say I escaped feminism by the skin of my teeth. I mean, honestly.
Well, and I mean, I think it depends on your, how you define feminism too. It depends on which wave of feminism we're talking about, right? First wave, second wave, then third and fourth waves, which really went off the rails. But I mean, you had those choices, right? And you made the choices that made sense for you. And that is, I think, still an exercise in feminism. You made those choices. You weren't forced into it. The patriarchy didn't demand of you.
No, but the matriarchy did.
Well, maybe so, but the matriarchy would still be feminism, right? I guess.
That's exactly, yeah.
So I mean, I think that part of, and this is part of the issue that really irritates my wife too, who made, some of these same choices, is that people treat her as though, or treated her, I mean, it's less of an issue these days, but treated her as though she was either benighted or burying herself, I guess sublimating herself, for the sake of somebody else. Well, that's fatherhood, motherhood, really, in part anyway. But she made those choices on her own, and people didn't respect that. And I'm wondering if you ran into some of those same issues. You're a little younger than we are, and so I'm wondering if you didn't run into some of those same types of reactions when making those decisions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're in a grocery store and you have like 3 kids in the stroller and a baby, you get these looks like, look at that poor woman. Look at her. Her husband won't let her out of the house. She's just barefoot and pregnant. She's a sex slave. Like, they treat you like you're this handmaid who needs to be liberated. But the women who are doing that, who have all their little kids, who are staying home, I mean, that is their choice. And like, it's funny, like, what about pro-choice? What about our choice to choose to not, to leave a career, to choose to stay home, to choose to breastfeed, all those things? Where's our respect? Why is that lifestyle, which is beautiful, sacrificial, requires, enormous sacrifice by both the mother and father, as you know, like, why is that denigrated? Why is that not, why are sex workers, OnlyFans girls, why do they get like all this virtue signaling credibility, and they're influencers, the child-free lifestyle is celebrated? What about the women they're the ones, as they say, doing the work? Like, we're doing all the work, and we're doing the heavy lifting, to keep the civilization going. And we just, like Rodney Dangerfield said, we get no respect.
Yeah, well, you'd have to ask the New York Post about the OnlyFans thing, because I think the New York Post is there, and I like the New York Post. I don't mean to be too critical, but it seems like the New York Post and the Daily Mail are like the PR departments of OnlyFans. So if you want to find out something going on OnlyFans, go to the New York Post or the Daily Mail. That's where you go for that sort of thing. I still don't get that, but you're right. I mean, it's the difference between real empowerment and false empowerment, right? I'm not even going to argue that necessarily that OnlyFans is false empowerment. If that's the choice that those women are making, I don't agree necessarily with that choice, but I don't think that they lacked agency in doing it. But I don't know that I would call that true empowerment either. But if that's empowerment, then certainly choosing to have children, raise them well, invest in your family and in your family's future, that's also empowerment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would agree that those women who are choosing the child-free lifestyle or choosing, the OnlyFans lifestyle, I don't know if they have agency. At least, I mean, I think they do, but I think that they have been brutally lied to for years, and basically brainwashed. I mean, the reason I know this is because I was brainwashed also, and it requires almost being deprogrammed as though you were in a cult to finally wake up and realize that, rampant promiscuity might not be the best way to get, to achieve a happy life. You're just, birth control and abortion are not liberating. And in fact, birth control in many ways is a form of mind control. And I mean, if you start really thinking about what happens to women who are kind of sold this bag of like feminism and how they turn out at the end, we're seeing I think we're reaping what we've sown. I think that, no one would want their daughter, on Tinder for 10 years. The dating app Tinder, they just celebrated their 10-year anniversary. And I was reading articles, glowing celebratory articles in like the Times and New York Magazine about women who downloaded the app, right, 10 years ago and are still on it. And like, that was one of the most depressing things I've ever read.
Yeah,
like,
that doesn't sound good at all. That does not sound like a recommendation. And I take your point too. I do. I take your point. And I think that, even men are somewhat programmed in that sense too by the culture. I mean, and they are rewired for it. And I think the risk is a lot greater for women and not to get too biological about it, but because when pregnancies occur, it usually falls on single women rather than single men to have the child, raise the child, and that is a disadvantage. One of the reasons why human societies evolved to have families and to promote families as the central unit of civilization. And I think we've been trying to deconstruct that now for 50 or 60 years. And it isn't freeing anybody. And I think that's one of the things that your argument sort of reveals is this isn't really freeing people. This is almost putting them in a form of slavery that looks a lot like liberation, but actually is its opposite.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you say slavery because one of the graphics that accompanied the Tinder 10-year anniversary article in the New York Times Magazine, the illustration was of a woman's wrist handcuffed to her cell phone with the Tinder app on it. Wow. Right. So there you go. And I was like, well, that sure is interesting. They would choose that graphic. But yeah, to your point about men, I mean, look, men have been only too happy to take advantage of, women's liberation, sex positivity. Like young guys are like, oh, we can do whatever we want with you guys, and we don't have to worry about you guys getting pregnant. We don't have to be forced into marrying you. Great. Like sign me up. Right. Like it just sort of made the men, guilt-free, shame-free. They could take advantage of all these young women who are, happy to, do whatever the men wanted. But it's also so destructive for men. I mean, that's not healthy either. So like, just because you have the quote freedom to, date a lot of girls, ghost a lot of girls, potentially impregnate them or whatever. Just because you can do that, doesn't mean it's good for your soul. And I think that people have mistaken like things that you're allowed to do or encouraged to do. That doesn't mean it's good to do. Like, decriminalizing, incredibly potent marijuana. Okay, it's decriminalized. That doesn't mean it's healthy. That doesn't suddenly mean it's like eating kale. We have to like draw the line here. Like just because it's tacitly approved, you still shouldn't do it. And that's what, I'm trying to make that case to people.
Yeah, I like the kale thing. That's spot on. You got to stick with that one. All right. And again, the book is called The Domestic Extremist, A Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War. And of course, there are a number of culture war battles going on right now. And the one I think that is most in the forefront of my mind is what's going on with the Dodgers. And you're in Los Angeles, and I'm an Angelino. I'm a native Angelino. I lived there for over half my life until I moved to Minnesota. And now I'm in Texas. And I have bled Dodger blue that almost the entire time. Even when I'm not following baseball, I'm a Dodger guy, right? Or I have been up until recently. And this was a team that really put an emphasis until very, very, very recently on the wholesome family entertainment that is Major League Baseball, right? When the O'Malleys owned it, when Tommy Lasorda and Walter Alston and Vin Scully were involved, it was all about wholesome family entertainment. And then they decide that they're going to do Pride Night. And I don't have an issue with Pride Night so much. I just assume that they've been doing Pride Nights for a while. But they invite the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, which is an anti-Catholic hate group, to honor them as community heroes. And I mean, this is really sticking a thumb in the eye of Catholics and Christians, not just Catholics, but Christians. I mean, they're blaspheming the entire religion, not just one particular ecclesial community. And the Dodgers are going to honor them for that. And I mean, that to me is just astounding. And what's astounding to me is that so far only a couple of the Dodgers have actually spoken out against this. Clayton Kershaw was sort of a, I know milquetoast is not the right word to use this week, but it's sort of a milquetoast sort of response. Well, let's have Christian family and faith night, and my comment to that was, although I think it was well intended, I don't think that we still really want Christian money night. Dodger Stadium is really going to cut it in this instance. And then Blake Trinan spoke out and was a lot harsher about it. But no one on the team is saying, well, I'm not going to be there. And I'm just really curious as to why there hasn't been more of an organized pushback by people in the community there. I mean, this is a heavily Latino fan base in Los Angeles. They are heavily Christian, either Catholic or evangelical. And yet there's been a reluctance to step out about that. Not by you, not by me. But what do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, I think that people here, it's Los Angeles. So, I mean, 70% of LA County voted for Joe Biden. People are not necessarily, this is who we're dealing with. So, I mean, just because we have, let's say a large Hispanic Catholic population, they're still liberals, they're not like, they're not like us. But I will say there is a huge pushback I'm seeing among my Catholic and Christian friends. I mean, I know a family who named their son after Clayton Kershaw. Okay. They, the biggest Dodger family that I know, and they have completely disavowed the team forever. I mean, honestly, it's game over for the Dodgers among a lot of people I know. And the shocking thing is, like you were saying, Ed, no one cared about Pride Night. They had Pride Night since 2012 or 13, right? So it's been going on for 10 years. They would have a night in June where they would hand out a rainbow pin. No one cared. If you didn't want to go that night, fine. And no one was thinking that the whole organization was, anti-Catholic or anti-family because they had that night. I mean, Pride stuff has been happening, for years. There's been parades and there's gay bars and all of this. And you don't see anyone saying anything about it because it's just well, let them do whatever they want. It's not no skin off my back.
Right.
So, right. So, but now this is why it's different to me. It's because people complained, this is super offensive. This is not just some kind of gay group. This is not just a gay person. This is a group that's doing, nude pole dances on the cross. And they have basically a stripper as Jesus doing basically sex acts with Jesus. This is their show. And that's not only anti-Catholic, it's just inappropriate. It's just gross. Right. It really doesn't have much to do with oh, they're gay or whatever. Okay, it's just it's pornography and they're a porn group. And are they going to honor porn stars next? Where does inclusivity, end? Are we going to include neo-Nazis one year? Are we going to include the Satanists? At what point can we draw the line and say, this is a family park? Okay. This is should not be, nothing R-rated should be happening at Dodger Stadium. That seems reasonable,
or honored. Which is what I mean. I don't think that the SPI is going to go out there and do the routine on the field. I think that they'll try to be a little bit more discreet than that. And the Dodgers will probably insist on it anyway. But that's not. To me, to a certain extent, that's not even the point. This group is an anti-Catholic hate group, and they do this for the purpose of humiliating and denigrating Catholics and Christians. And I mean, you said, the neo-Nazis. I actually made that analogy yesterday in one of my posts. That would be Wednesday because this won't run today. About the neo-Nazis in Skokie, Illinois, and I think it was 78 that applied for a permit to march, right? And the ACLU ends up defending them. And I have always argued that was the right call. because
Right.
as long as they weren't breaking the law, they had every right to organize in a public space as anybody else did. Now you could all counter organize and counter demonstrate as long as you're peaceful. That's what America's about. But you don't honor. I mean, if somebody had said, "Let's," oh, by the way, those neo Nazis in Skokie, well, they donate some money to a hospice care place, or they
Right.
a hospice care place for their allies. Well, let's go ahead and let's honor them at Wrigley Stadium, because this was, again, in Illinois. I mean, people would have lost their minds over it, and for good reason. You don't honor stuff like that. And to me, that's the issue, is that they are honoring a group for their hatred, and they're participating in that hatred. And even though it was explained to them that this is what this group is, they reverse themselves back, because they felt it was, I mean, my read on this, Peachy, is that they felt it was safer to insult the Christians than it was to insult the hardline progressive activists behind the SPI.
That's exactly right. That's who they're afraid of. I mean, to me, that was very telling that when they groveled and apologized, even after there had been all this pushback, even after people had said, no, stop. And Catholic groups were saying you can't have them. The Dodgers made a huge choice as an organization to side with the sisters. Okay. So just a giant middle finger, double-fisted middle finger to anyone who disagreed, right? To anyone who didn't want their kids associated with. So the whole organization is saying, we stand with the sisters. We stand with this group. Okay, so now no matter what you do on the field, they could come out in black tie, tails, the tuxedos, doesn't matter anymore. Now we all know what the Dodger organization as a company believes, what they stand for, and who they prioritize, who is more important to them. Same with Target. This is who's more important to Target. These sort of satanic clothing designers that they've given these licensing agreements for. Like, this is who they are prioritizing. They don't care what normal people, normal parents and kids want. They've chosen poorly. And really our only recourse now is to just, punish them as much as we can by refusing to take part.
Right. And again, this is something that you're going to that you do cover in Domestic Extremist, A Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War.
Mm-hmm.
And this culture war goes beyond Dodger Stadium. I mean, Dodger Stadium is not necessarily an everyday experience for people. People go there, even if you have season tickets, you go there, maybe a few dozen times a year. Most of the rest of it is just you buy a ticket or you watch it on TV on occasion. A place like Target, you brought up Target, and I think it's a great topic to hit on this. A place like Target, you go shopping there all the time. Sometimes you do your grocery shopping at Target. And here you've got Target partnering with a Satanist, right? To do designs for kids. And this is the part to me that I think is even more insidious. And you get into this in your Federalist column from Wednesday as well. It's one thing to do this with adults, right? And I tend to be a little bit more libertarian than some of my fellow conservatives and say, live and let live. I don't care what you do as an adult. Just don't shove it in my face. But my job isn't to tell you necessarily you've got to live this way, unless you're claiming also to be Catholic. That's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah.
But the big issue here is that it's now targeting kids. And Target, this was in, some of these designs were designed for kids, some of them weren't. But there's also the story that came out of Disneyland, also in Southern California, not Los Angeles, Orange County, but they all run together. I dare you to stand in Anaheim and tell me how it's different than Alhambra.
Right. It's not. Right. It's just all California now. Just one big unistate nightmare.
It's a megalopolis. Well, at least from Santa Barbara to San Diego, it's a megalopolis there.
Yep.
But Disneyland had a fairy godmother with a mustache.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
introducing the boutique there, the dresses in the boutique to little girls. And
Well, no, go ahead.
oh, I mean, and I thought your comment on this was really spot on, because I know that, Disneyland and Disney World place a high emphasis on not taking people out of the show. And this is your comment, and it struck me about this, is that A Man in Drag is not only bizarre and inappropriate, but takes guests out of the show. And their whole routine is, you know, to have this illusion continue. If you're staying at one of the hotels, while you're in your hotel room, while you're going through the hotel, the whole thing is one big fantasy. And that's its selling point. And then you see this and you're going, wait a minute. So tell us a little bit about your reaction to that. I mean, you've got kids. Would that be something that you would want to have to explain to a little kid?
Yeah, I mean, no. And look, I've been in that boutique many times. I have little girls. We're bibbity bobbity customers. We've done the whole makeover, the whole experience. And like I said, it's one of the last places in the park where you have this really, truly splendid, magical, immersive little kid experience. I mean, from the minute you walk in, the fairy godmother apprentices are in their little dresses, and the little girls gets, it's a beauty parlor, and they sit down and they do their makeup and their hair. And then when they're all finished, they like press a button and like music plays, and the curtains open and they're presented. I mean, it's just very sweet. It's overpriced, but it's almost worth it, on a birthday. And so, but like Disney, Disney cast members are taught that like, you never break the show. Mickey Mouse never takes off his head. Do you know what I mean? He never uses his voice. Like, you can't break it. When I was 5, and I've been going to the park probably once a year my whole life. I've been there a million times, Disney file my whole life. When I was 5, my dad was taking me to find a bathroom, and he opened the wrong door, and there was like a changing room, and I saw Donald Duck without his head on. It was like a guy in like a Donald Duck bottom suit, and I was traumatized for life. But now to see,
that's sad.
I know, I never forgot that. I was like, he's not a duck, Daddy. What is he? So now, but you have a man in the fairy godmother dress and with his full mustache. Walt never used to let men have mustaches or beards in the park. Everyone had to be clean cut. That they changed that a few years ago. Slippery slope. And now he's also in full makeup. And so he's not trying to pretend to be a woman. He's saying his name is Nick in the video, the fairy godmother guy. He has his mustache. It's clearly a man, and he's just in drag because he's expressing himself or whatever. And the thing is, they have a changing room in there. Little girls are changing into the dresses. Like, who's in there with the girls? Why does Disney want to put this so up front? He's at the door greeting them. I have no problem, none. If that guy washed off his makeup and wore a little medieval man's outfit and was checking them in, like, no one would care. Why does it have to be the godmother character? Right. They couldn't give him a special man character. Like, why is that so important? Because it's political. They're just trying to make a point.
I mean, you make him a footman, right? I mean, it's a Cinderella. He's one of the mice that turned into a footman.
Oh, right. He's the coachman. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of roles they can play.
I mean, and this is one of the frustrations that I have with this, and the other is the idea of who's starting the culture war, right? And I'm certain that you're going to discuss this in Domestic Extremists, A Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War, which is the idea that somehow it's the people who are reacting to this that are responsible for setting off a culture war. No, I'm sorry, but if I had gone out of my way to pick a fight over Pride Night, at the Dodger Stadium when it wasn't even a game I was going to attend, I could say, okay, yeah, that you're reaching. That's not what's happening here, though. They're going into the schools. They're indoctrinating children into gender ideology. You talk about that, and that's what you talk about in the
Federalist piece.
The Federalist piece, right? How to speak up and opt out of your child's Pride Month's activities at school.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason to have pride flags in a kindergarten or a first grade. I'd argue you probably don't even need it in middle school, really. But I mean, it's inappropriate. That's not the type of thing that you send your kids to school to learn. those are values that children can learn at home. They should be being educated in school and learn values at home. And it's really the other way around these days.
Yeah, I mean, my book title, Domestic Extremists, it's obviously ironic because they call us extremists because we don't want to go along with this very extreme program that they're shoving down our throats. And so we're the extremists. I think one of the Target clothing designers, the trans clothing designers, was calling the people who protested domestic terrorists. Okay. The Department of Justice called parents who complained at school board meetings against pornography in elementary school libraries. The Department of Justice called them domestic terrorists. Like we're we're the bad people. We're extreme, but no, we just want to be normal. But there's like a war on normalness, on normalcy. And so my point of my book is, the only way to win this is to become extremely domestic, i.e. reject all of this stuff, pull yourself, pull your family, pull your kids out of just mainstream American culture, because look at all of it from top to bottom, this corporate, educational, college, media mess is coming at us. You can't, they're not letting you opt out anymore. Like if you go to sign up your kid for like summer camp or preschool or the pediatrician's office, you get a drop down of like, what gender is your 6-month-old? And it's like 50 genders. And like, no, I don't want to even, like, I'm at the pediatrician. They make you write your child's pronouns. It's like, no, I opt out of that. Like, I don't want to, if you're a doctor and you don't know what gender my kid is, you need to go back to medical school.
Right.
Why am I the extremist? We're just normal. Okay. That's it.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, nobody would have been doing this, right? 10 years ago, if somebody had said, well, I'll stick with 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even more so. Right. If you had gone to the doctor and he's giving a wellness check to your little boy and said, well, G is doing fine, you would have said, what in the hell are you talking about? His name's not G. Now it's required, as you said. Right. They ask you to do this, and it's not really even asking. So I mean, we could go on and on about this for a very long time. And I cover this territory with Adam Baldwin on Amiable Skeptics, quite often because it's interesting territory to cover. But your book, Domestic Extremists, A Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War. I mean, that's really what you're trying to do here. You're trying to prepare people, probably especially, I would imagine, families, in dealing with a culture that has taken a sudden, sharp left turn into insanity, and fighting to keep your own family from falling victim to it.
Right. And I think my book is actually also targeted to women. I mean, just because of my own trajectory, my own, quote unquote journey, as they said. And the point I'm trying to make is, like, if I can do it, if I can kind of break out of like the conditioning or whatever, literally anyone can do it. If I'm not Betty Crocker. I don't vacuum in heels and pearls. I'm not like a traditional trad wife. You know what I mean? Like I'm a modern lady. I don't have a farm. I don't touch live livestock of any kind. I wouldn't last very long on a homestead. Okay. Sorry.
Well, nobody who is an Angelino would last very long on a homestead. I'm just telling you that right now.
In the apocalypse, we're all done. We're all dead.
Like, we're
there's
dead.
No way. You have a chance. You're in Texas. Like, you might make it, but like, if I have to start a fire, that's it. Like, it's over.
I think I'd still have to try to suck up to a neighbor to survive the apocalypse. Right. I'm sorry. I mean, just again, native Angelino, totally not prepared whatsoever.
We are doomed over here, Ed. But yeah, I mean, the case I'm trying to make is like, there's no middle ground here anymore. Yes, they brought the fight to us. We're just trying to live our lives. We don't want to fight. I don't have any interest in all this stuff kind of came to me. And I really feel like, well, someone's got to stand up here. I don't want to, but I have other things. I have a lot of laundry to fold, I should be folding laundry, but I'm on Twitter and I'm like fighting this war because I have, people say they have skin in the game. I have a lot of kin in the game. I have these kids. They're growing up. I want them to have families. I hope to have many grandchildren. And like, my goodness, where are we going to be in 20, 50 years? I'm not looking to go back to like the 1780s here, put women back, in the, harvesting, whatever. How about the 1980s? Like within recent memory, like you said, it was normal for women to have, let's say, 3 or more children, or women to choose to stay home. And that was completely fine. For children to, if they like their gender, they can keep their gender. Like,
right.
we have to remember these things.
And we have to also remember how well it worked too. And while we had problems and we weren't perfect, we certainly were much better organized for happiness and social engagement than we are right now. And I think that that's another thing that we have to remember while we're talking about your book, Domestic Extremist: Practical Guide to Winning the Culture War. Let's not forget some of your other links though too. Before we shuffle off here, you can find Peachy Keenan on Twitter at Keenan Peachy, and I'll have the link in the show post. But at Keenan Peachy is where you can find her, and I know because I just found her. I just
there I am.
You're not required to follow me back, but it's okay.
I guess I will. Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. And you can go to her Substack, which is Peachy Keenan's Extremely Domestic, which is peachykeenan.substack.com. And she writes occasionally there and at the American Mind, as she mentioned earlier. And is there anything else that I'm forgetting about here? Any other links that we need to make sure that
Well, I just want to make sure everyone knows they should pre-order my book. I'm available on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. And don't forget, every time you pre-order my book, a drag queen breaks a nail. So please go ahead and do that now.
Or loses a sequin. One or the other.
That's right.
All right. Well, Peachy Keenan, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I hope that you'll be coming back here and we can continue having some more of these conversations. It's been great.
Oh, it was great to be here. Thank you so much, Ed. Take care.